I'm Grace Cowell.
I'm Grace Curtis.
And you're watching G2 News.
Lights. Camera.
Action!
The Great Barrier Reef has been in trouble for the last couple of decades due to global warming. The warming of the ocean has caused coral bleaching and habitat destruction throughout the world.
The United Nations has gotten involved in the past, but recently an experimental mission produced data that will push the Great Barrier Reef issues to the top of the agenda.
Coral bleaching takes place when the ocean's waters are heightened to a point where coral begins to die. In the process of dying, coral produces a symbiotic algae to protect itself.
Coral bleaching is an important indicator to large environmental change and a bad omen to the health of the entire ocean. The Great Barrier Reef, once full of thriving species and colorful coral, is now stark white and decaying.
Coral is used by millions of people for medicinal and nutritional purposes. Coral protects coastlines from storms as well as erosion, and scientists across the globe have been calling for change due to this climate change for years now.
The ocean absorbs about a quarter of the carbon dioxide that is produced through greenhouse emissions. The ocean absorbs about 10 to 20 tons of CO2 each year. The waters have warmed about 1.5 degrees Celsius in the past year, which is an overwhelming number.
A quote from ABC News says a United Nations-backed mission is recommending that the Great Barrier Reef be added to the list of endangered World Heritage Sites, warning that without ambitious, rapid, and sustained climate action, the world's largest coral reef is in peril.
Due to this mission, the United Nations is working with the Australian government to put more resources into saving the largest coral reef on the planet. More attention and funding will be directed towards the coral crisis thanks to this announcement.
Under the Endangered Species Act, more than 25 coral species are listed as threatened or endangered. There is still more work to be done, but this publication bodes well for change.
In national news, over the past month, the United States has been hit hard by mass shootings. So far this year, the country has experienced over 600 shootings, with 3 that were especially fatal occurring in November.
On Sunday, November 13th, 3 lives were claimed at the University of Virginia when a gunman opened fire on a bus carrying the UVA football team back to campus.
The team was returning from seeing a play in Washington, D.C., when the gunman, a former team member, killed players Devin Chandler, Lavelle Davis Jr., and Deshaun Perry, and injured 2 others.
The school was placed under a shelter-in-place order until the gunman was taken into custody the following morning. He is now facing 3 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of using a handgun.
Less than a week later, a Colorado Springs LGBTQ+ nightclub called Club Q was struck on the night of Saturday, November 19th.
The gunman entered the club just before midnight, injuring 18 individuals and killing 5 others: Daniel Aston, Kelly Loving, Raymond Green Vance, Derek Rump, and Ashley Green Pugh.
The gunman was stopped after being tackled and disarmed from club patrons and is now facing charges of suspicion of murder and bias-motivated crime causing bodily injury.
On the evening of November 22nd, Virginia suffered another mass shooting when a gunman opened fire at a Walmart supercenter in Chesapeake.
The gunman, who was an overnight team leader at the store, injured 4 and killed 6. Lorenzo Gamble, Brian Pendleton, Kelly Pyle, Randall Blevins, Tanika Johnson, and 16-year-old Fernando Chavez Barron, before dying of a self-inflicted gun wound.
These most recent attacks have resulted in a stronger push for gun control. Following the Colorado Springs shooting, Biden made a statement where he said, quote, "We must address the public health epidemic of gun violence in all of its forms," end quote. And quote, "We need to enact an assault weapons ban to get weapons of war off America's streets," end quote.
Biden has made gun control one of the main points throughout his campaign and presidency. Over this past summer, he signed the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, making it the most significant piece of legislation passed in the past 30 years to tackle gun violence.
On Tuesday, November 8th, the Maryland state midterm elections were held in order to select new congressional representatives and state officials.
During the elections for governor, Democrat Wes Moore beat out Trump-endorsed Republican Dan Cox, winning 64.6% of the votes to Cox's 32.3%. Moore is now Maryland's first black governor and the 3rd black governor to be elected in the United States.
For the Senate, Chris Van Hollen was the incumbent up for re-election, representing the Democratic Party, while Senator Ben Cardin, who is also a Democrat, was not up for re-election.
Holland won his re-election with 65.7% of votes against Republican Chris Shaffey, who received 34.2% of votes. With this most recent election, Maryland remains having 2 Democrats in the Senate.
After these midterms, 7 of Maryland's 8 seats in the House of Representatives are held by Democrats, while only 1 is held by a Republican.
While the Democrats were able to hold most of Maryland's seats, nationally the Democrats lost the House. There are now 220 Republicans and 213 Democrats after the Republicans gained 8 seats while the Democrats lost 9 during the election.
The Democrats, however, were able to keep the Senate. There are now 48 Democrats with 2 independents who caucus or side with the Democrats, and 49 Republicans.
The final Senate seat has yet to be decided as the race in Georgia had no majority winner and was too close to call. There will now be a runoff election on December 6th to decide between candidates Democrat Raphael Warnock and Republican Herschel Walker.
Finally, county executive elections were held throughout the state, with our home Anne Arundel County seeing a close race. The results were originally too close to call, but on November 15th, Republican nominee Jessica Hare conceded, declaring the incumbent Democrat Stuart Pittman the winner.
Thank you for joining us for the November episode of G2 News.
Our sources are linked in the description box below, and we encourage you to keep researching these topics and more.
Feel free to check out our social media accounts and our weekly website, which are linked also in the description box below, to keep up to date with our progress.
Bye!